Unlike most YouTubers, my channel didn't start with a video. I mean, it did in a literal sense, but it started with a stack. I missed the days of the mean stack and the MERN stack. I almost felt like these were markers of an era of time, like LAMP stack was before. But we didn't have one for the new ways of building, and I decided to coin T3 stack around my name, THEO, the 3's the letters after, but also around the set of tools and technologies I was enjoying building with, those being Next.js, TypeScript, React, and Tailwind, but a key piece of glue that helped hold all of it together called tRPC. It's an incredible library. I still love it dearly. The ability to just write some functions in the back end and call them on the front end and have all the types and validation and everything just work, it still feels magical to this day. But a lot of other tools have been invented since, a lot has changed in the ecosystem, and the way the T3 stack was proposed isn't even the way I use it today. And while my channel started because I wanted to showcase how cool this tech was and show y'all why I liked building with it, and thank you all for the years of support since, it's been nuts. Today, there's a new solution, a new stack, a new point to start. And it's also by another tech YouTuber, one you might have heard of before. Today, Josh Tried Coding dropped the JStack. In many ways, it's just like the T3 stack, but in a few key ways, it is very, very different. Even if it is just another TypeScript YouTuber, this one knows what he's doing, and he wanted some things that were different from the T3 stack, and I'm so excited to dive into all of this with you. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is one of those rare ones that I actually use every day. Well, not use in the sense that like I open it up, but it actually kind of uses me. What the hell am I talking about? Well, it reviews my code. CodeRabbit has made our life so much easier as a team that loves to ship fast. It's an AI code reviewer that gives actual useful feedback. I know, we were skeptical too. And honestly, at first it was okay at picking small things like weird accessibility issues, but for the most part, it wouldn't catch on to real problems. It's gotten so good that my CTO, Mark, who did not like it at first, was just telling me how impressed he's been with the team and how much better it seems to be getting. And I agree. Here's an actual bug it caught where I would have double counted limits on T3 chat that it caught almost immediately that Mark even admitted he probably would have missed in this code review. This prevented a meaningful, serious regression from going out to production. That's nuts. If that was all it did, it would be worth the super cheap $15 a month. Hell, it's free for open source projects. But that's not all it does. It draws out diagrams of the flow changes in your PRs for you. How cool is that? We can see all of the stripe changes, how the events loop, and the relationship between all these different events and functions in our code base. And for every complex enough flow, it'll draw one of these out for you. It even finds relevant PRs to reference. It's surprisingly good. It gets smarter as you use it, and when you tell it things, it learns them, saves them, and uses them in the future. If you want to ship fast and you're tired of code review, which I know we all are, you really should give CodeRabbit a shot. Thank you to them for sponsoring. Check them out today at soydev.link/CodeRabbit. I am so excited to dive into this with y'all. Let's start with a quick read through of the homepage, and then we're going to actually build an app with it because, come on, we have to. Ship high performance Next.js apps in minutes. They perform so highly that he couldn't even get the CSS for that rectangle aligned. Right now it's slightly diagonal. That's how you know they're moving fast. You know, they say if you're proud of your homepage and brand when you launch too late. I'm joking, this looks beautiful. It's the stack for seriously fast, lightweight, and end-to-end type-safe Next apps. Credible DX, automatic type safety and auto-completion, as well as the ability to deploy anywhere, Vercel, Cloudflare, and more. There's already 1,318 stars. I am sure this will be a lot higher by the time you watch, but obviously there will be a link in the description if you want to join us and give JStack a star. You can build a production-grade app in literally an afternoon. This will be cool. AI-optimized docs. There's a lot of services that are providing an llms.txt file, which is a file you can give to something like Cursor that can use to index all the things you might need to do. Did I show up in the stars already just from that? That's cool. It live updated. Now I'm in here. That's dope. Good shit. But yeah, the AI optimized thing is super cool to have a quick thing that you can like include in your editor. So if I go over to Cursor, you can add new custom docs, and this is a link to some documentation you want to add. This can be one of those llms.txt files, and when you do that, it will link all the other things that you need your editor to have access to. One of the most interesting things I noticed here is the use of Hano. I usually just use Next.js as the backend, so I'm very curious how that is being used here. And obviously it works. I mean, look, you got a Lambo. You can't doubt the Lambo, right? That's the rule. Let's get started. Create JStack app at latest. We will pnpm create JStack app at latest. Sure, my JStack. Oh, it doesn't autocomplete. My JStack app. Do I want to have a DB for the test? I want to see how they use it. We'll do Drizzle. offer Postgres, Neon, or Vercel Postgres. That's two of the same product in just Postgres. I get why it makes like the imports and management for the Drizzle configs a lot better. I like SQLite as a default like go-to quick example for things like this. I don't want to fight with any of those providers right now, so we're going to restart and not do the DB side. We want a pnpm install cd over my JStack app. Let's take a look at the code base. First, git status, make sure. First point loss, not initting a git repo here. Does it even have a git ignore? Okay, it has the git ignore, just init it for me. Git status, git add, init. More points off. Why is there a yarn lock? What is this, 2018? Sorry, bud, it's not 2018 anymore. Also has a Wrangler file, which is great if you want to use Cloudflare, but if you don't, I don't love that being included. I guess that's not going to hurt if you deploy other places. I really need to stop overanalyzing these things. Let's actually dive in and use it because I'm excited. He even called out in here in the JStack that this was largely inspired by T3Stack, which, thank you for the kind words, Josh, apparently inspired him to love the relationship and the type safety between client and server. But he wanted a few things to be done differently. Independent state management. This is interesting because I don't agree, but I do want to cover his way of thinking about this and then show how it differs from my way of building. tRPC is a fantastic tool for providing type safety between the front end and the back end, but it has trade-offs because it couples itself so deeply to React query hooks. The coupling is convenient, but it's also limiting. As you get into more advanced use cases and eventually run into problems, I find myself having to find the tRPC specific solution to the problems. Everything that you might need to do with React Query has been answered by TK, but everything else, less so. He also is upset that he can't use React Query as a standalone state manager because it's really good for that, but he feels like it's too closely tied to tRPC when you implement it this way. Yeah, I'm curious to see how he does things different, but I personally really like the idea of the tRPC React Query binding being a super dumb mirror of server state, rather than React Query being another place to implement complex state on the client. The place where I would see this being most useful is if, like, do I want to spin up a code base to show this? I'm going to spin up a create T3 app to show this. I can't believe I'm doing this. This is going to be a long-ass video now. So T3 app inits. You just have to commit init. Cool. Now that's done. Let's actually get to the part I wanted to show, which is, let's say we want to get two things here. So we have hello as a procedure that gets hello whatever, and we have get latest, which is a procedure. If we want these in a component, I'll go make some random component.tsx, use client, export default. Cool. We have this random component. Let's say we want to get the results from both get latest and from hello. I'd have to write, look at that, autocomplete being so smart. Import that from tRPC React. Cool. Now we're calling API post hello use query with this text. And once this data comes back, it's going to be hello world because that's what this function does. And you can even command click here and it brings you to the procedure. This is why tRPC is magical. The thing that you can't do is have two of these procedures in one use query. If theoretically you wanted to have get latest and you wanted to have hello, it gets a little messy. Const latest post data. Cool. Thank you, cursor, for figuring out what I'm doing before I could even verbalize it. Here we're doing two use query calls. One is getting from the hello endpoint, and one is getting from the latest endpoint. These are two different queries that are handled separately with React Query. I have to then mangle them together in the React code itself. So if I want to use latest post data and hello data together for some reason, now I have to do that outside of the hook. If you're deep enough on React Query, this might feel dirty because ideally you'd take whatever function these are calling and do something like const data equals use query. This needs to be async. That's not right. API dot. Oh, we don't have a standard client. This is going to be pseudocode. Ignore the giant pile of type errors here. It's because this isn't how it works. But if you wanted to get all of this together at once, you would call these two different APIs in parallel here, then return the data and use that for something. So if you wanted to hit 2 endpoints, get data from 2 places, and then do something with it, that'd be great. There are catches though. First off, this solution would actually be slower than this because React will let you call both of these hooks in a loading state and fire these in parallel. So if you wanted to do this properly, we'd have to delete these awaits, hello promise, latest promise, and then we have to do a promise.all where we wait for both. Otherwise, we're not firing them in parallel. It also means really cool benefits like batching are a lot harder to implement because when you do this, React is smart enough, and React Query in particular combined with tRPC is smart enough to go through the render tree, hit all of the loading states that it can hit, and then take all of the queries that are pending and fire them as a single batched request, which is super, super, super nice. But if you do want to write your own async logic before it gets to React Query so that you're doing the logic management inside of React Query, or more importantly, inside of your functions, not inside of React itself, there are obvious negatives here. And I have honestly found myself in this position too, where I'm moving more and more of my state out of React into other things, be it Zustand, be it IndexedDB with Dexy, be it external libraries or other things. The less state management I can write in React, the better. And having to mangle between latest post and hello data here is doing state in React. And the more state you have in React, the more likely you are to have weird, obnoxious debugging errors. Oh, Julius just dropped the solution here. Fixed it. You might see why I like doing things this way now. Because if we're getting data from 2 different endpoints on the server, and we have these 2 hooks, it's a lot less chaotic than all the mangling I'm doing here instead. It's a lot less chaotic. But there's a better solution than both of these, and I think the solution is criminally underrated. If we want this, and we want this, why are we doing it all in 2 different things on the back end? The whole point of tRPC is that you can make bespoke endpoints for the things you need. Hello plus latest. And here I can also include whatever we did here. Posts. Ta-da. Now we have this special thing done on the back end that handles all the cases we wanted to handle. And all I have to call on the front end is the one thing I actually want, which is hello plus latest. And now I can delete literally all the other code here. Don't have to do any mangling or combining of things. You're good to go. There are benefits and negatives to all these strategies. I like doing the right thing in the back end, and anywhere you can move state away from the browser, you should do it. And if you can't move it away from the browser, you should probably try to pull it out of React if you can. So now let's see how this is handled in JStack. I'm also going to close all my other editors quick. I'm so excited to see how JStack does this instead. Okay, we have our API, which is J from JStack. JStack's a package? Interesting. I need to read the docs more. There's more things in this Y section that are important. Not just JSONs, also a good call out. JSON, super JSON, but it can also return plain text, HTML, web standard responses. Super nice. Also, platform agnostic development. You can deploy it pretty much anywhere. You technically can with Create T3 app, but we definitely lean on platforms like Vercel and Netlify because they make it a lot easier to pull all the parts together. Here's the file structure. JStack TS, which does the initialization, the main app router. Routers are the different routers. Let's take a look at one of those. Post router. Mocked DB here because I chose to not have a database. Posts, we have these values here that are just kept in memory in this JS instance. And j.router. Okay, so JStack itself appears to be its own tRPC alternative. Very interesting. Recent is an endpoint. Public procedure.query return c.superjson. Post at -1 or null. This is funny to see that the example is so close to... I love this. So some people would say this is a ripoff. I don't see this that way at all. I see this as a genuine appreciation for the work that Create T3 app did in trying to make something that fits his specific needs that we didn't. I love that. This is actually, it's weird and kind of trippy, but in a way that's honestly super exciting. This really is Josh RPC. I'm happy that chat's catching on pretty quick. That is what we're seeing here. Very, very interesting. Okay. So recent is wrapping with super JSON. So if you didn't know this, JSON is super limited with what it can return. If we returned something in here like time, new date, and we didn't ISO-string it, we just returned new date, this would look like a date on the other side. And if we go over here and hover, it's going to think it's a date. Well, that's the other one. Hello. We hover over, you'll see it thinks it has a date. If you haven't configured tRPC correctly, that's going to come back as a string because when you turn this response into JSON, it's going to break. Thankfully, the way we configured tRPC inside of Create T3 app is using super JSON, which will transform all the responses as well as the requests going across the wire to make sure that valid things that we use in JS, like dates, like big ints, like all of the other types that aren't supported properly in traditional JSON are now supported. Super JSON is an awesome open source library that lets you do more with JSON. It's not traditional proper JSON, but it's super, super handy. And it's cool to see that it's a first-class citizen in here, even if it's a little weird that you have to call c.superjson on all your responses. I get it, though. I think that's the right call. If I don't do that, can I not call it? What if I just return that? Okay, we get an error here if I just return that. Cool. So it seems very type safe, like it's forcing your hand to make you do the right thing here. That's cool. Now we have a create, still using Zod for the input validation, still using builder patterns. This really, honestly, this is so close that I think this might become my recommended path depending on how the other parts work. If it's really this close to doing traditional tRPC, but it supports things that aren't as deeply tied to the tRPC ecosystem, this might make a ton of sense. I've kind of been wanting a more minimal tRPC alternative, and this is looking very much like it. Okay. You're getting my attention. Let's go back to the docs and keep learning. So we have the routers, initialize JStack. You can specify your environment variable type here, which makes it type safe across your app. Bindings, database URL, string. Not sure what this makes type safe. Maybe like to init it that you need to pass this database URL as part of the environment. Not fully following that bit. That's fine. Interesting. The core of JStack's the app router. It's the entry point to your Next.js backend, and it manages all of the API routes. Interesting. So you merge the /API Hano router with the Next.js app router. And now when an HTTP request comes into your server, app router knows where to send the request. Routers help you group related features. You can have user router, payment router, post router. Yep, this is all tRPC stuff. Then you connect it by adding it as an additional router being merged. Handle all incoming requests with our app router, create a catch-all API route. Ah, so it's the other way. We're embedding the Hano route into Next.js here. That makes sense. Let's go to the next page. Client, create client, app router, base URL. This looks so familiar. Okay, it's a little more complex as we have batching and stuff in here, but it's very similar. And the chaos of getting the right URL to actually post things to, not fun. Yeah, get base URL is a function I've had to deal with far too many times. Client usage, you can now make API calls from anywhere. Yep, this is the piece we were talking about. Client.post.recent.$get parens. And now this is just an async function you can call. This is the equivalent in Create T3 app and tRPC to what we were doing before in this component, if I command Z enough, where you can call api.useutils.whatever. So if you want to just get some data, so const get some data, you can call api.useutils. It's a lot more parts, I'll admit. Don't autocomplete that. .client. Post or query. It's not that yet. It's .post. Hello. Query. You have to give it text. Cool. So like you get the idea. Not the quickest thing. What I see here is effectively you cut out this part at the cost of you now don't have the built-in bindings to things like React Query. Benefits and negatives for sure, but it's definitely a lot simpler. But here's the key. This is pretty much exactly what I was guessing and showing before. Instead of calling api.something.useQuery, you just call useQuery and you pass it the async function for the thing that you want to do. Julius is making good points. If you're not familiar, Julius is one of my employees as well as one of the lead maintainers of tRPC. They're effectively just using the tRPC vanilla client, which doesn't have the React Query bindings. You can expose that. Hell, you can even expose it wherever we expose this. Export const client API equals .client. Cool. And now we have this, and I can change this over to use client API. And it's basically working the exact same way here. And to be clear, what I'm saying here isn't, oh, you can do this in tRPCs, so what Josh put his time into is useless. No. I actually kind of think, I'm almost thinking about this the opposite way. It's really cool seeing that I can get most of the functionality I care about from tRPC with something that is certainly way more minimal. tRPC has so many moving parts, so much stuff that you have to get working together properly that you basically couldn't set it up properly unless you were a wizard or had a lot of free time, or eventually you just used Create T3 app. But in the times before C23A existed, it was way too hard to set up tRPC properly. It was genuinely not great. Now it's way better because we have those things. But with this, it looks like it's going to be a lot simpler. I almost don't think this should have started with the template repo. This should have started as the package because the package here is really, really cool. Has a lot of the same middleware and procedure stuff that we have in tRPC, which is really cool too. Middlewares are great because they give you a standard way to make sure a user's authed and attach the user data to the next request or to whatever procedure you're defining after. It's super, super nice. I don't love having C and CTX. It's a bit confusing because they're different and it doesn't super clear. Yeah, C is the Hano context. CTX is your context. Input validation all through Zod. Hopefully they support standard schemas so we can do other things there. They even support WebSockets, which tRPC kind of does with subscriptions, but it's not super stable. This is super, super cool though. I want to run this. Hop back over. npm run start. Failed. Dev. Cool. New post. Cool. Not showing that. Let's add some stuff to this. Okay, so this is just a standard Next app, but with this new server directory. Interesting. This is more and more like Create T3 app than I thought. I didn't expect this part to be served through Hano internally like this, though. That's the most confusing thing, is we're effectively resolving a Hano router inside of the Next.js router. But API has this catch-all for get and post that will handle all incoming API requests using approuter.handler. This is a pattern that we recommend for things like upload things so that we can expose the handlers from our library to pull it all together. It's cool to see it inside of this directly. So we hop to page. There's this recent post component. Let's change this to show all the posts. A couple catches to look out for. Since we have to define our own functions in React Query here like this, you have to make sure you key things properly. Because if I use get recent post in two places, and one of them is different from the other, it will cause weird cache mismatching. And if I call this get recent post, but I invalidate get recent posts instead, we're not going to get a type error. We're not going to get any indication I did something wrong here. But now when I do a new thing, it doesn't update because it didn't invalidate the right values. That sucks. The thing I'm trying to showcase here is you can do this with tRPC as well. But when you do it with tRPC, you don't have to pass around these magic strings and hope that you get the right value. You just call the thing .invalidate, and this will invalidate it. And if you do post.api.uctlpost.hello.invalidate, you can even pass this the input, right? Yeah. Invalidate will take the input that exists on whatever your endpoint is. So you can invalidate anything that had this input. Super, super cool. Theo here calling hooks everywhere. Thought he knew React. Okay, fair point, Julius. I know. I'm hacking things. You shouldn't call use utils like this because utils can change. And you definitely shouldn't do what I did here with client API. I was just trying to hack it so I could show it. You can export a vanilla API with tRPC. I'm lazy. I'm sorry for sinning with the library you've slaved so hard to maintain for us, Julius. Back to my JStack app, though, because I wanted to actually make some changes here and see how it feels. So let's get it to list all the posts instead of just the recent one in the title there. So first we need a new endpoint that does that. So instead of post.recent, no, not the best benefit. You can't command click to go to the definition. It just brings you here. And I have to manually go to app router and dig down. No. Josh. If you didn't know, one of the coolest things in tRPC, and it wasn't easy for them to add, it was a total bitch to add that required a lot of TypeScript hacks. When you have something like this, you can command click the function. See, when I'm hovering over, it has a little link when I'm holding control or command. I can click, and here's the backend code. So that's all it takes to go from the front end, which in that case was random component. If I see this api.post.hello plus latest, I can command click and be in the backend that is exactly what that is resolving to. And as awesome as this JStack stuff is, it is missing one of my favorite table stakes features. It knows the types fine, so it's not like it's not getting the type data or something. I just can't hop over the fence here. Sad. And if we hop back in here, I can still do the changes I wanted to. Look at that. all. So now we're going to return public procedure query c.super.json with all the posts. And over here, we're going to do a new const. Cool. Look at that. And we'll await and validate on get all posts. And we're going to add a new thing above the form. Cool. God bless cursor. None of this code actually matters. Just if the posts are loading, then we put the loading state. And if they're not, then we list them all as paragraphs. Oh, P can't be a descendant of P. Okay, I thought it was doing better than that. Div. Cool, there we go. More posts. Even more. Yay. Isn't that cool? Pretty nice. And as always, there are catches. Most of the catches I'm about to show are also a thing in tRPC, but I want to show you guys the network tab for a sec. New content. Send. We have this post, which Firefox, very competent browser, doesn't make that long enough to see post there, where we create this. This is the post that sends the data for the create. Totally fine, normal, nothing special there. But we made 2 get calls. We made 1 get call for recent and 1 get call for all, which means there's no batching. Also, if I refresh, you'll see we're doing different GET requests for each of these because the client's not smart enough to batch because the client doesn't own the resolution layer. Where with tRPC and tRPC plus React Query in particular, we can group those requests together and only have to make 1 request instead of 2. And it seems like a flame war between the smartest people I know has started in my chat. I don't think so. I think I've very clearly positioned this as JStack versus tRPC. Like very, very clearly. If I haven't, then the people who are watching, I cannot help. You need certain transformations to make it impossible for TypeScript to preserve those relationships as is. Yeah, this is the problem. When you do transformations of data, like functions and whatnot, and then they're being exposed, you have to work really hard to make sure TypeScript doesn't lose track of where they originally came from so they don't lose the associations. Yeah, it's frustrating. Batching's a band-aid for bad data fetching practices? I think it's also a realistic thing to accept when you have more than 5 people working in a code base. Like the only code bases I've seen that aren't batching or doing way too much chaotic waterfalling are code bases that are small or code bases that have like the crazy like relay stuff going on where they're properly compiling out the data fetching via some weird stuff with GraphQL. Yeah, if you want to, like, I agree that like batching is a band-aid for bad data fetching practices, but in order to have good data fetching practices, you either have to invent your own shit or just suffer. And yeah, we are currently in the inventing your own shit side. Yeah. There is a lot of good here. It's really nice to see an alternative. It's especially nice to see one that's so focused on deploying many different places. But as I play, I realize that I am actually very happy with the T3 stack, and I am very happy with tRPC. I'm excited for the next tRPC release, which is going to fix a bunch of my issues with it and add some really cool stuff for server components. But who knows when that one's going to ship. In the interim, though, if you don't like the things that tRPC does so peculiar, if you want a client that feels a lot more vanilla and you don't want it to be tied to things like React Query, and you don't mind losing command click and some of the other full stack type safety stuff that I love so dearly, this is a really good option. It's still very early. I do trust Josh to maintain it well and keep working on it. But in the end, what I think this really is a tribute to, kind of honestly, even a love letter to the things that make tRPC great, exposed in a way that's a lot more minimal, can be plugged straight into Hano, and for the most part, behave reasonably and realistically, whether or not you decide to use it within Next.js. It's really cool seeing the patterns that I love, things like the chaining and builder pattern to add input validation, to handle mutations, to add public and private procedures, to see all of these awesome patterns become accessible in different ways. But I think I'm just going to keep using tRPC for now. I am curious what you guys think, though. Did Josh waste his time, or is this an awesome project and I'm just missing everything? I am super hyped to see it. The future for all of these things is bright. Everyone deserves full stack type safety, and you shouldn't need tRPC to have it. That said, I'm probably going to keep using tRPC myself, but I want to know what you guys are going to do. Let me know in the comments, and until next time, peace nerds.